Under the bright lights of Pulse of America, the nation watched in silence. The host, Marcus Tate, stood at the center of the circular stage, composed as always. But even he could feel the weight of what was about to unfold. America was waiting not just for answers, but for something deeper. Truth, conflict, maybe even betrayal. Across from him, Karoline Leavitt adjusted her mic. Her posture was perfect. Her platinum hair shimmered under the studio lighting, but her eyes were focused, unblinking. She was not here to perform, she was here to strike. "Thank you, Marcus," Karoline said, her voice calm but charged with purpose. "I'll be direct. The American people have been told Joe Biden is fully in control. But what if that isn't true?" The audience murmured. A few gasps. Phones came out. The production team at the back of the studio glanced at one another. Karoline continued, "A new video has surfaced. David Hogda, DNC coach, remitted in a private meeting that Anthony Burnell, Jill Biden's chief of staff, has more access to decision-making than the vice president herself. That's not alarming. I don't know what is." Hailed up a printed still from the video. Blurred footage, but the voice was clear. David Hogg's words, now echoing across Twitter and TikTok. "Bernal practically runs the West Wing. Harris is left in the waiting room." Gasps rippled across the room. Some of the audience leaned forward, eyes wide. From across the stage, Representative Jasmine Crockett's expression tightened. She shifted in her seat, then leaned into the mic. "This is absurd," she snapped, her voice slicing through the tension. "Karoline, you're pushing a conspiracy theory with zero verified facts. President Biden is not only capable, he's been restoring America's image after your party nearly burned it down." Karoline didn't flinch. "I didn't create the footage, your own party did." "Cherry-picked," Jasmine shot back, "taken out of context and used to degrade a sitting president. What you're doing is dangerous." The host, Marcus, raised a hand to regain control. "Let's remember, this platform is for clarity, not chaos, but it was too late. Twitter was already on fire." The clip of Karoline's claim had hit. Over 1 million views in under 10 minutes. CNN, Fox, and Al Jazeera had all started live segments reacting to the broadcast. Jasmine leaned forward, her eyes locked on Karoline. "You're undermining democracy by questioning the legitimacy of our president. You want chaos because you know your ideas can't win in peace." Karoline slowly stood, only half turned to face Jasmine and half facing the camera. Her tone softened, but her words became sharper. "I respect the office of the president, but we cannot pretend everything is fine when the truth is hiding in plain sight. If Anthony Burnell is influencing decisions more than elected leaders, then the vice president, then the American people deserve to know." She paused. The room held its breath. Then Karoline looked Jasmine directly in the eyes and asked calmly, "Is Joe Biden really the president? Or just a symbol?" The question didn't land like a punch. It landed like a silence, a deep, suffocating silence that pulled all the air out of the room. Jasmine froze, lips parted as if trying to find the right words. Marcus tried to speak, but nothing came out. Then the crowd exploded. Some booed, others cheered. Phones flashed. The control room was in disarray. Security guards quietly moved into place along the sides of the stage. This wasn't just debate. This was a break in the political dam. Karoline remained. Still, Jasmine gripped the table, her hands trembling with rage. "How dare you, Marcus, finally cut in. We're going to a quick break. Stay with us." The camera zoomed out. The stage dimmed. In the background, staff whispered urgently. Mics went dead, and backstage phones buzzed non-stop. But the damage was done. Within minutes, #WhoRunsTheWhiteHouse was trending worldwide. Political commentators called it the most explosive debate moment in years. The White House declined to comment. VP Harris's press office issued a vague statement about continued support for the president's leadership. But rumors were swirling. In a shadowy corner of Capitol Hill, a senior DNC official watched the footage again and again, rewinding Karoline's words. In a quiet office in Texas, Jasmine's chief of staff stared at an envelope marked confidential that had arrived earlier that morning. Inside, one name, a Bernal, and somewhere inside the White House. Behind closed doors, someone picked up a secure phone line and simply said, "They know." The sun had not yet risen over Washington, but the city was already awake. In newsrooms, think tanks, and political backchannels, one question consumed every conversation. Who is really running the White House? The Pulse of America clip had gone nuclear. It was no longer just trending, it had fractured the political landscape. Networks were replaying the moment. Karoline Leavitt asked if Joe Biden was just a symbol, like it was a national trauma. Outside Karoline's temporary D.C. residence, protesters gathered. Some held signs that read, "Thank you for asking," while others screamed, "Election denier." Security had doubled overnight. Her team advised her to lay low. She refused. They're already trying to erase the footage, she said, eyes glued to her phone. They're scared. We're onto something. Inside a sleek CNN studio. In New York, anchors debated the implications. Legal analysts warned that Karoline's statements could undermine national security. Conservative commentators praised her courage. Internationally, European papers picked up the story. The Guardian called it a post-truth bombshell, while Le Monde asked, "Does America even have a president?" But the real panic wasn't outside. It was inside the DNC. In a sealed room beneath the Democratic National Committee headquarters, a group of party operatives watched the clip on loop. David Hogg sat at the far end of the conference table, visibly shaken. Jasmine Crockett sat across from him, silent, her hands folded tight. "You admitted it on tape," snapped a female strategist. "You named Anthony Bernal directly. It was a private fundraiser," Hogg argued. I was exaggerating. We all do that behind closed doors." Jasmine finally spoke. She had the footage before it was leaked. "That's not exaggeration. That's a breach." A younger aide, eyes glued to his tablet, interrupted. "Guys, we have another problem." He turned the screen. A Reddit post titled, "The Quiet Power of Anthony Bernal" had surfaced. Claimed Bernal was attending classified briefings meant for cabinet members. Attached was a blurry image from 2022. Bernal seated 2 seats away from President Biden during a Pentagon meeting. The room fell silent. "Is it real?" someone whispered. Jasmine looked away, a deep unease settling in. She had been a loyal defender of the president. But in the past few months, something had shifted. Her private briefings had become rare. She hadn't seen the president without aides in nearly a year, and Bernal. He always seemed to know more than any staffer should. At that moment, her phone buzzed. An encrypted message, anonymous. One sentence? "You weren't supposed to hear that name." Her fingers froze. She looked up at Hogg, who had just gone pale, staring at his own phone. "You too?" she asked. He nodded. "Yeah?" Meanwhile, at the Capitol, Republican lawmakers were circling like hawks. A few of them, energized by Karoline's viral moment, drafted an emergency resolution for a special investigation into executive decision-making irregularities. Speaker Mike Johnson didn't endorse it, but his office didn't shut it down either. In a quiet cafe near Capitol Hill, Karoline met with a man she hadn't seen in over a year. "Glad you called," said Dan Rourke, a former NSA analyst turned whistleblower. "But if you're pulling on Bernal's thread, you better be ready." He slid a thin folder across the table. Inside were pages marked "Confidential for White House eyes only." Karoline scanned the top page. A name stood out in bold. Anthony Bernal, Special Status, Executive Liaison Authority. "What is this?" she asked. "Unofficially," Rourke said, sipping his black coffee, "he's not just Jill Biden's chief of staff. It's been in the loop since the Obama administration. Speech drafts, diplomatic memos, even intelligence briefings. He has eyes in everything. Karoline looked up, and Biden signed off on that. No, that's the thing. He didn't. At the White House, staff scrambled to contain the fallout. A new video was released showing President Biden leading a cabinet meeting. But independent analysts quickly pointed out the footage was spliced from 3 separate events. The timestamps didn't match. Then came the second blow. Al Jazeera released a translation of a leaked conversation from the Chinese Foreign Ministry. A diplomat was overheard saying, "The Americans have a puppet. They don't know whose. Really pulling the strings. It is our opportunity." Jasmine Crockett was watching it live from her D.C. office. She didn't say a word. Her chief of staff, a sharp-eyed woman named Layla, whispered, "If we don't say something soon, the GOP will own this story." Jasmine exhaled slowly. Her expression hardened. "Then get me Anthony Bernal." Layla hesitated. "You sure?" "No." Jasmine stood up, her jaw clenched. "But I've defended this administration for too long without knowing what's really going on. It's time I asked my own questions." And across the city, in a soundproof basement, Anthony Bernal received a call. A staffer leaned in, whispering, "Jasmine Crockett wants a meeting." Bernal smiled, a slow, knowing smirk. "Of course," he said. "Let's give her what she wants." But what Jasmine would uncover in that meeting would go far beyond anything Carolyn or the American people were prepared to hear. The meeting was set for 8:30 p.m. Jasmine Crockett arrived at the Eisenhower Executive Office building through the West Gate, escorted by Secret Service agents who hadn't even been briefed on who she was meeting. The corridors felt colder than usual. Fewer staff, less noise. Only the quiet hum of fluorescent lights above her. "Room 214B," said one of the guards. "He's waiting." Jasmine hesitated for a moment before walking in. The office was large but unassuming, dimly lit, with thick curtains drawn shut. A small American flag stood in one corner, and at the center of the room, seated calmly behind a desk covered in carefully arranged files, was Anthony Bernal. He rose with a polite smile. "Congresswoman Crockett," he said, extending his hand. "I was wondering when you'd come knocking." Jasmine didn't smile. She didn't take the seat he gestured to either. "You've made yourself hard to ignore," she said coldly. Bernal gave a light chuckle. "That depends on who's looking." She crossed her arms. "There's footage, whispers from your own party. Even intelligence chatter from Beijing saying you're operating beyond your role. And don't pretend this is all some misunderstanding." Bernal slowly walked to the side of the room, poured 2 glasses of water, and set one in front of her. "Let me ask you something," he said. "Do you know how many hours the president spends in secure meetings each week?" "I'm not here to be lectured." "I'm not lecturing," he replied. "I'm informing." "Spends fewer than for hours in full classified briefings. Most of the time, it's delegated to a rotating circle of advisors. That's not me stealing power. That's survival. Washington doesn't run on speeches anymore. It runs on coordination." Jasmine stared at him. "So you admit it? You are making decisions the public believes are coming from the president." Bernal leaned forward. "I'm doing what needs to be done when no one else will." The administration is fragile. The GOP is circling. The global stage is on fire. Someone has to hold the seams together. Jasmine felt a chill crawl up her spine. "You sound like you're justifying a silent coup." "No," he said, his voice suddenly hard. "I'm avoiding collapse." Meanwhile, across the city, Karoline Leavitt appeared again, this time not on Pulse of America, but on a joint segment between Fox and Newsmax. The hosts grilled her with excitement. "You ignited a national storm," one said. "What's your next move?" Karoline glanced at the camera, her tone now calmer, less of a political missile, more of a journalist with a lead. "There are layers to this story," she said. "And if Congresswoman Crockett truly cares about the truth, she'll go deeper. than just a single meeting with Bernal. Because if I'm right, and all signs say I am, we're looking at something more dangerous than one advisor going rogue. We're looking at an unelected shadow cabinet. Within minutes, the phrase shadow cabinet began trending. In her car after the meeting, Jasmine replayed Bernal's words in her mind. He hadn't denied anything, but he hadn't threatened her either. That was the most disturbing part. She called Layla. Get me access to every visitor log, every security clearance update, and every policy memo with Bernal's signature. Quietly, and not through White House systems. I want it off-grid. You sure you want to go that deep? Layla asked. I've spent months defending this administration. I need to know if I was defending the truth or a lie. The next morning, Jasmine's request was intercepted. Inside the NSA's internal threat monitoring system, a quiet alert was triggered. Congressional Oversight Watch List, level orange. Her digital footprint was flagged. Access logs rerouted. And a copy of her query was emailed directly to a secure address tied to an unknown.gov domain. Someone was already watching her. Back in her own office, Jasmine met with a former campaign, Alino, a cybersecurity expert who owed her a favor. She handed him a flash drive. I need you to trace this login, she said. It's tied to classified clearances that shouldn't exist. He plugged it in, scanned it. This isn't normal, he said quietly. These IDs, they're fake, but they're embedded deep into real networks. Someone's covered their tracks on an agency level. Jasmine clenched her fists. I want to know who signed them in. That night, another clip leaked. This one showing Anthony. Bernal speaking privately at a closed-door conference 2 years earlier. In the clip, he says, the president trusts me to handle the issues he doesn't need to worry about. In this town, control is about confidence, not title. The public went into overdrive. Conservative lawmakers called for an emergency hearing. Democratic leadership fell silent. Karoline posted a single word on X. Verified, Jasmine watched the clip in her office, alone. Her phone buzzed again, another anonymous message. You found the surface. Dig deeper and you'll find how far the rot goes. The next morning, a sealed envelope arrived on her desk. Inside was a list of names. Half of them weren't public officials. And one name at the very top made Jasmine freeze completely. Her own Jasmine stared at the envelope on her desk, the list of names still trembling in her hand. At the top, her own. Beneath it, a string of high-level insiders, career officials, intelligence liaisons, and mid-tier bureaucrats she had never heard of. Some were marked with red dots. Others had a black line drawn across them. She didn't know what the symbols meant, but it was clear now. She wasn't just a player in this story. She was already inside it, and someone wanted her to know. Her phone buzzed. Layla, you need to see this. Fox just ran a piece saying you're in league with Bernal. They leaked your meeting time and location. It's already all over X. Hashtag Crockett complicit is trending. Jasmine swore under her breath. Her fingers hovered over her screen, then stopped. Responding publicly now would only validate the narrative. She needed proof. Real, undeniable, explosive. She folded the envelope and slipped it into her inner coat pocket, then locked her office dot across the Capitol. Karoline Leavitt was preparing for her next broadcast. She stood in front of the glass makeup mirror, straightening her blazer. Her producer, a sharp-eyed woman named Dana, entered with an update. We traced the leak about Crockett. Didn't come from Fox. It came from a drop server in Geneva, same. One used by that journalist who exposed the Iran cables last year. Karoline narrowed her eyes. So this isn't just internal sabotage. No, someone wants Crockett burned. Karoline exhaled slowly, which means they're scared she's getting close. She stepped into the studio. The lights dimmed. Cameras rolled. Her voice was calm but firm. There's something bigger at play here. I've called for an investigation into Anthony Bernal's role in what I now believe may be an unconstitutional shadow network operating within the Biden administration. If Congresswoman Crockett is part of this network, she will answer. But if she's not, she needs protection. Because someone is silencing the truth. The next morning, Jasmine drove herself to a small safe house on the edge of Arlington, one she'd once used during her campaign to meet donors quietly. She wasn't sure who she could trust anymore. Inside, waiting for her, was the man she'd called hours earlier, Daniel Rourke, a former State Department liaison turned whistleblower, who had been living off-grid since 2023 after leaking documents, linking Chinese telecoms to encrypted. White House comes. He was skinnier than she remembered, paranoid, but sharp. "You shouldn't have contacted me," he said, pulling the blinds shut. "They've got backdoors everywhere now, even your car's GPS. "I got a list," she said quietly. "My name's on it. So are a dozen others." Rourke's face tightened. "Show me." She handed it over. He scanned it, his fingers pausing over each line, then he stopped. "These names, ... This is a control roster. I saw something like this once years ago. It's not just political, it's operational. Operational how?" He looked up. "They're either assets ... or targets." Jasmine felt her chest tighten. "Why would I be on both lists?" Rourke sighed. "Because you're unpredictable. They don't know whether to recruit you or remove you." Before she could speak, her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered cautiously. Crockett speaking. There was static, then a male voice. "You're in danger. You have until midnight. Do not return to your apartment. Watch your back." The line went dead. Her hands trembled slightly as she lowered the phone. Rourke looked at her. "You've officially crossed the line." Back on Capitol Hill, a letter was circulating, drafted by GOP leadership, requesting a closed door hearing on unauthorized personnel influence within the executive office of the president. But it wasn't just Republicans pushing anymore. Moderate Democrats, shaken by the growing media frenzy and mounting silence from the White House, were signing on to in the Oval Office. President Biden sat quietly, reviewing a security briefing, with an unlit cigar between his fingers. Across from him, Jill Biden read a memo. Anthony Bernal stood behind them, silent. The room was quiet. Then Jill looked up and asked, "Do we bring her in?" Bernal didn't answer immediately. "We wait," he said. "She's already deeper than she realizes." Back at the safe house, Jasmine opened her laptop. She had one shot at staying ahead. She uploaded the list to a secure server and scheduled it to auto-send to 5 journalists she trusted. If she didn't cancel it within 24 hours, then she opened an encrypted chat with Layla.Jasmine. "Get to Marcus Tate. I want to go live. Pulse of America." "Prime time, Layla. Are you sure, Jasmine?" "If they're going to bury me, ... I'll bury them first." Marcus Tate was preparing for a quiet evening in his Washington studio when his phone buzzed with a secure call. The name made him pause. Jasmine Crockett. He answered immediately. "I want to go live. Prime time. Pulse of America, Jasmine." Said without hesitation. Her voice was clear but carried exhaustion, as if she hadn't slept in days. Marcus leaned forward. "What are you about to say, Congresswoman? The truth? The names? The silence? Everything?" Marcus didn't respond right away. Then he spoke quietly. "You understand what this means." "I do," she replied, "and I'm not backing down." Back in the Capitol, Karoline Leavitt watched a live feed from her office. Her aides were scrambling. New polls showed her favorability soaring, but so was the volatility surrounding her name. She was either being praised as a patriot or condemned as a destabilizing force. She glanced at her email. A message from a private contractor with ties to the NSA simply read, "Crockett is being watched." 2 operatives seen near her safe house, one unknown. Karoline closed her laptop. This was spiraling. That night, Marcus Tate took the stage. With a solemn expression, the studio lights were dimmed. No audience tonight, just the camera and the country. Good evening, Marcus began. Tonight, something unprecedented. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett has requested an unfiltered, unedited live appearance to share what she says is a threat not only to her life, but to the very foundation of democratic leadership in America. Then Jasmine appeared, dressed in a dark navy suit, no makeup, no teleprompter. Her hands rested calmly on the table. She looked directly into the lens. I'm not here to campaign, not here to defend my record. I'm here to speak the truth before someone else decides to silence me. Then she pulled the envelope from her pocket and placed it in front of her. This list came to me anonymously. It includes names, some current government employees, others former. Each of us is either being monitored, manipulated, or marked. A pause. She looked down for a moment, then back up. They say Joe Biden is in charge. But what if the real power, the real daily decision-making, isn't in the hands of our elected officials? What if that power belongs to unelected individuals operating under the guise of support staff, advisors, or even spouses? She named Anthony Bernal. She named David Hogg. Then, carefully, she mentioned Jill Biden, not accusing, but suggesting. I'm not saying the president is a puppet. I'm saying the strings are tangled. Within seconds, reactions exploded. Across social media, some called her brave. Others said she'd gone rogue. At that moment, Karoline Leavitt was watching with folded arms, expression unreadable. Dana, her producer, turned to her. She just turned the whole game upside down. Karoline didn't speak for a long time. Then finally, no, she just forced us to choose sides. Inside the White House, a storm was brewing. Jill Biden slammed her tablet onto the table. Bernal's face was pale. She wasn't supposed to talk, Jill hissed. Bernal stepped away from the window. We underestimated her. Jill's eyes locked onto him. No, you did. Meanwhile, in the studio, Marcus looked visibly shaken. Congresswoman Crockett. He said slowly, you understand this will spark hearings, investigations, possibly charges. I hope it does, she said. Kay, because if this is the end of my political career, then I want it on record that I did not stay silent while the American people were deceived. Then she paused. And if I disappear tomorrow, if I accidentally fall downstairs or get caught in a strange car crash, let this video be my testimony. Her words hung in the air. Kose nodded slowly. We've heard your truth. America has. Heard you? We will not edit this broadcast. We will not censor it. As the show ended, Jasmine walked off stage in silence. Outside the studio, Layla met her with a trembling smile. Ah, you did it, she whispered. Jasmine exhaled, glancing up at the dark sky. No, ... I started it. As they drove off, they didn't notice the man on the nearby rooftop. He lowered a small parabolic mic, whispered something into a headset, and disappeared into the night. By morning, the media was on fire. CNN and Al Jazeera had both aired the full tape. The New York Times ran the headline, Crockett goes nuclear, claims Biden's power controlled by shadow figures. Karoline Leavitt was on every talk show, refusing to celebrate. I warned the country, she told Sean Hannity, but I didn't expect her to be the one to risk everything to prove me right. The Capitol buzzed with whispers. A special committee was being discussed. Subpoenas were being drafted. Behind the scenes, far from cameras, powerful figures were making calls. What do we do about her? One asked in a hushed voice inside the executive residence. There was silence. Then someone replied, we wait. She just lit the fire. Now let's see who burns. The morning after Jasmine Crockett's broadcast, the United States didn't wake up. It snapped awake. In every coffee shop, office, news studio, and Senate hallway, the same four words were being whispered. Who runs the country? Jasmine's video had been clipped, subtitled in multiple languages, and shared globally. In London, the BBC questioned America's democratic stability. In Berlin, foreign policy advisors convened an emergency summit. In Beijing, the Chinese Foreign Ministry released a quiet but mocking statement. Even their leaders don't know who's in charge. Karoline Leavitt's phone hadn't stopped buzzing. Her press secretary stormed into her suite. "We've been invited to testify before the Select Committee on Executive Oversight. They're calling it the Shadow Inquiry." Karoline looked up from her notes. "And Jasmine, she's being called too. But there's a problem." Karoline sat forward. "What?" "She's missing." A chilling silence. Jasmine had vanished. No answer to calls, no sign at her home. Her last known location was the car ride after the live broadcast. The studio's external security footage had a 5-minute gap. Marcus Tate, shaken and visibly disturbed, appeared on camera the same afternoon, speaking straight into the lens. "This is not a game," he said. Congresswoman Crockett risked her life to speak freely on this program. She has been harmed or silenced. Let me be clear. The American public will never forgive the institutions responsible. That night, Capitol Hill was under more pressure than it had seen since the January 6 hearings. Democrats and Republicans alike were demanding answers, but in hushed voices, many were afraid. Afraid of saying too much, afraid of naming names. Inside a closed-door intelligence briefing, Karoline faced 7 senators, 4 Democrats, 3 Republicans, 1 of them. A veteran senator from Vermont slammed a folder on the desk. "This isn't about party. If what Crockett said is true, if unelected people are controlling our elected president, then we're all compromised." Karoline nodded. "I agree, but there's something else, someone else." She pulled out a flash drive. "This is footage I was sent anonymously 2 hours ago. It shows Anthony Burnell, Jill Biden, and an unknown third person meeting in a private room at Walter Reed Medical Center 3 days before Jasmine's live broadcast." The screen flickered to life. The third person had their face covered, but the voice was unmistakable, deep, slow, and chilling. "She speaks soon," the voice said. "You know what that means?" Burnell replied. "If she goes public, she'll take Leavitt down too." The voice then silenced both. Gasps filled the room. Karoline looked around. "I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. It's conspiracy to suppress a sitting member of Congress, possibly worse." A Republican senator leaned back, visibly rattled. "Do you think Jasmine's been—" Karoline didn't blink. "I think she's in danger, but she's not dead." Not yet. Far from Capitol Hill, Jasmine Crockett sat in a small cabin in rural Maryland, wrists bruised but eyes blazing. She wasn't kidnapped by a foreign power or a rogue operative. She was taken by someone inside her own party. The door opened. A woman in a charcoal gray suit stepped in. "You were warned, Jasmine," the woman said softly. "You put the system at risk." Jasmine smiled weakly. "Maybe it was already broken. You're hurting your own president." "I'm trying to save the people who voted for him." The woman approached slowly, placing a recorder on the table. "Then let's make a deal. You walk away from the spotlight. You resign quietly. No more interviews, no more broadcasts. We let you go alive." Jasmine stared at the device, then at the woman. No deal. Back in Washington, Karoline was preparing for her own interview with Al Jazeera. The interviewer, an experienced war reporter, didn't hold back. "You've been accused of inflaming division, Karoline. Critics say you weaponized conspiracy theories." Karoline leaned forward. "Then let them listen to that tape. And if Jasmine never returns?" Karoline's voice dropped to a whisper. "Then I go looking." The next morning, an encrypted file was sent to 3 outlets: The Intercept, Reuters, and The Washington Post. It contained not only the full audio from Walter Reed, but internal emails between top Democratic operatives. The subject line: Operation Silver Silence. The story was now unstoppable. Public trust in the administration dropped overnight. The House Oversight Committee announced emergency hearings. Protesters surrounded the Capitol, some waving American flags, others holding signs that read, "Where is Jasmine?" And inside a black van parked near Fort Detrick, a masked woman received a text. It was from an untraceable number. Phase 2 begins at midnight. Preface statement. Jasmine wasn't the only one who knew the truth. She was just the first to speak. The Capitol dome glowed under floodlights, but beneath that glowing symbol of democracy, nothing felt stable anymore. The leak titled Operation Silver Silence had blown a hole through Washington's core. The documents were real. The voices were verified. And most terrifying of all, Jasmine Crockett was still missing. Across every major network, anchors struggled to remain calm as chaos built hour by hour. Fox News. This could be the biggest political scandal since Watergate. MSNBC. A sitting member of Congress possibly detained by insiders. CNN. Sources suggest international attention is now intensifying the investigation. 3:47 a.m., the president of France called for an independent inquiry into America's internal stability. The Prime Minister of Canada offered assistance through neutral mediators. The United Nations Security Council scheduled an emergency briefing. And in Washington, D.C., the streets were no longer quiet. Thousands of citizens had flooded Lafayette Square with candles and signs. Some chanted Jasmine's name. Others demanded answers. "We want to know who's in charge," echoed over drums and megaphones. What had begun as a political fight was now something deeper, spiritual, even existential. Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt stood in the corner of a small operations room deep in the Capitol sublevels, surrounded by agents, cyber specialists, and 2 independent senators. Her face was pale but focused. One of the agents spoke without turning from his screen. "We tracked the metadata from the audio files. They were uploaded from a satellite phone used on military frequency bands. That narrows it." Karoline stepped closer, and Jasmine. The room went quiet. Then came a ping. One screen showed a live camera feed, shaky, loris, but unmistakable. It was Jasmine Crockett, seated in a makeshift studio, lit by 2 weak desk lamps. She looked tired, bruised, but alive. A second later, the video feed went live to the world. "My name is Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett," she began, voice firm despite a slight tremble. "If you're watching this, it means I've escaped. The people who tried to silence me, Kane, now I'm going to name them." Silence across the globe. She continued. "There's a group not elected, not sworn in, not answerable to the Constitution, who have been managing major policy decisions while President Biden struggles with health issues. His staff has hidden." She named them Anthony Bernal, Valerie Whitaker, former DNC strategist Colin Yates, and most chilling of all, a private security contractor named Reed Vaughn. With ties to multiple black sites in Virginia, they've kept the president in a controlled environment. They screen his interactions, filter his briefings, and redirect his public messages. The world gasped, but the truth doesn't belong to a party. It belongs to the people. The feed cut. Within minutes, the Justice Department was surrounded by protesters and reporters. The FBI released a vague statement calling the claims deeply troubling. Inside the Pentagon, generals convened a crisis meeting, not about war, but about trust. At the White House, the press room exploded with demands for answers. Who is Reed Vaughn? Why hasn't the president responded? Where's Jill Biden? Inside the West Wing, aides sprinted through hallways, red-faced and silent. A lockdown was unofficially in place, and Karoline Leavitt walked into the Senate chamber with a flash drive in hand and handed it to the chair of the Oversight Committee. "This contains every message Jasmine Crockett sent me in the last 72 hours. Every location ping. Every whistleblower file. You don't have to believe me, but you will believe her." The chairman nodded grimly. "We're opening a public hearing today." The next hours unfolded like a movie. C-SPAN cameras streamed live as Congress reconvened. Jasmine Crockett was escorted inside by 2 U.S. Marshals. The chamber rose to its feet. Even Karoline Leavitt looked momentarily overcome as she approached Jasmine and whispered, "You made it." Jasmine nodded. "We both did." Then she turned to the microphone. "There are moments in history when telling the truth means risking everything. I accept that risk." Her full statement lasted 29 minutes. It covered every piece of evidence: internal emails, psychological assessments, hidden from public view, forged signatures, financial trails, and testimony from 2 former aides turned whistleblowers. When she finished, the room was silent. Then thunderous applause. Not just from her party, not just from the public gallery, but from senators and representatives across the aisle. For the first time in years, unity, brief but real, swept across the most divided building in America. Outside, as Jasmine and Karoline stepped out into the sunlight, reporters surged toward them. One shouted, "Congresswoman Crockett, what now?" Jasmine smiled. "Now we clean house." Another asked, "And you, Miss Leavitt, do you still stand by your dangerous question?" Karoline nodded. "I stand by asking it." "And I thank God," she answered. As sirens faded, flags waved, and the American people looked toward along. Road ahead, one thing was certain: the truth had survived. But the cost? Still unfolding.